You good? Okay, good evening, everyone. My name is Bruce Colgan, Chair of the Temple Planning Board. I call this meeting to order. First order of business would be the approval of the draft minutes from December 3rd. Oh, and I would like to appoint Jim Medeiros as a voting member.
Do you want to wait on the minutes in case Kathy comes in? I had a couple of things.
Mhm.
Nothing major, but just
We can do that after.
yeah, I just had on page 2 when we were talking about the site plan review, just to label H, I, J, and K on what sections those are referring to. She did it for the other ones, but
There she is.
I think that was all I had.
We just started the minutes, Kathy. Anybody else have anything on minutes?
No.
No.
So Kathy, I was just saying on page 2, under site plan review, I think letters H, I, J, and K, it doesn't refer to this section. And I think you did that for the other ones.
Oh, went down into the.
It's under new business site plan review, H, I, J, and K. And for some reason, J and K are bold, but it's minor. Just so people know what section we were talking about.
Any other changes?
I actually have one, I forgot to, I took Jim out of the members present, but I forgot to put in the absent.
Thanks. And then Randy's partner came with him too, but we don't know her last name.
And I was thinking, if they don't physically say anything, do I need? To say who they are?
Probably not.
Probably not.
Yeah.
Yeah, we should probably give you a microphone too, but when you're speaking, no, it's okay. No, it's okay.
I'll accept the motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as amended.
Second,
Carter, how do you vote?
Yes.
George? I vote yes.
yes.
Yes. Yes. Okay, that's approved. Invitation for public comment. This is the time of the meeting where we would open the meeting up to public comment. This would be public comment not pertaining to the public hearing that we're about to open. So any other public comment. Okay. So hearing none, then the next order of business would be the actual public hearing. The public hearing we're having tonight is one we usually have recently, recent years, quite regularly about this time of year, to recommend proposed zoning changes to vote on in the voting booth in the March meeting. So this year we have 7 proposed amendments. Most of them having to do with accessory dwelling units. But so I guess we want to just start at the top and work our way.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, just in terms of process, just like this is the first hearing, and if we make any substantive changes, we would have a second hearing in January, just so you all know how that all works. And yeah, we could end up pulling some after tonight. We'll have to see how that goes. So this is by no means a final version. So this is your opportunity to make recommendations or ask questions. Start at the top.
Yep. All right, so the very first amendment would be to adopt Article 1. Our authority, under authority and purpose in our zoning, a permissive ordinance. The town, our town council recommends this. So it would be section 4, permissive ordinance, uses which are not permitted either by right or by special exception as set forth in this ordinance are prohibited.
And I would just add that this is what we presented last year and ended up deciding to pull. This language was like just the really basic statement that we were proposing to add, but it seems like there's it might need some additional language for clarification, so it's clear that nobody's losing their right to do something they would want to do on their property. That's not what this is trying to say. It's just saying this is how our zoning has been interpreted by the courts in New Hampshire, and this is just to be really clear. It's just a clarification, but nothing changes procedurally in our zoning. People want to do something, they can still do it either by right or by special exception, just the same way it works now. Did you want to add anything, Mark?
Yeah, so my understanding is New Hampshire Superior Court did rule during the last 12 to 18 months or so, an interpretation that the zoning ordinance in Temple is permissive as defined by the state of New Hampshire. His comments that I'll read here, and this is an updated comment from the town's council, reaffirmed their advice from last year to explicitly state in our zoning that, hey, we have a permissive type zoning. There are two types that are generally seen in the state of New Hampshire: permissive and prohibitive. About 75% of the towns have permissive zoning, if I remember correctly, and 25% have prohibited. Now, the terminology is wacky. I get that it is from the state RSA's definition. So permissive means if it's written in our zoning, then it's permitted. For example, in the residential district, the village district, and the mountain district, a landowner is permitted to build a single family home. Piece of cake. You got to meet setback requirements and the like, but that's permitted. You're permitted an ADU attached today. You're permitted through a special exception process, a detached ADU, if I remember correctly. So those are defined as the permitted kind of things, and there's a whole list in our zoning that are permitted. The problem we have, the challenge we have in Temple zoning is it's actually a mix. There are the sections that define the zoning, the individual zones we have, village, residential, and mountain, and there's different levels of permitted things in there, single family homes and the like. And then there's these weird exceptions that lay in on top of that, which say, for example, junkyards are not allowed in the mountain district. So that's a prohibitive statement buried within permissive zoning. So someone reading it, a current landowner or a current resident, or a prospective future landowner or resident, reads it and it's easy to get confused as to what is the predominant reasoning in Temple zoning. So the lawyer has suggested, we currently have things that are permitted, things that are prohibited, and uses that are neither explicitly permitted but allowed through a special exception process through the ZBA. The existence of the first and last, which is things that are permitted and things that are permitted through an exception, defines a permissive ordinance. Here's the list of things we can do. The middle one, things that are prohibited, provides it, creates a prohibitive ordinance, which are in conflict, and therefore, basically in any conflict like that, if someone wants to do something which somebody in the town, takes exception to, whether it's an abutter or a select board member or a board member, it generally ends up in a court case. and which costs money. So this is really intended to protect the current residents and understand, hey, this is the way it is today. There's no ordinance changing below of the document. It's purely documenting the interpretation of New Hampshire Superior Court that, the town got to through a bunch of legal fees in a parallel case, and try to prevent that from happening again. So, it's just defining what's there today.
Use the microphone. Sorry.
So I have a question. How many court cases have we had in the last 40 years?
You know, Ken?
3 or 4.
Mhm.
So I don't see where there's a problem right now.
So I think it's a bit ingenuine to say, or disgenuine to say, that we're not changing anything. We have never come out and put a stake in the ground and said Temple has a permissive zoning. Yes, the court in the most recent court case said that we have, or appears to have, permissive. And I hear the attorneys say that. Again, neither of those are good reasons for Temple to have to move away from prohibitive zoning. We get that it makes your job harder. You have to come up with the things that are prohibitive. But again, it's not our job constitutionally to have to come up with all of that. As a landowner, we should be allowed to do on our property what is we wish to do on our property without hurting others, without infringing upon other people's rights, yada, yada, yada. Again, the words permissive and prohibitive are not used appropriately in any of this language. I know that Jim cannot be here because he is on the school board and has sent a letter, partly of things he had said last year, and I hope you've all gotten that letter. But he has also gone on to add additional components to it that should clarify his position. For me, I'm struggling with the routineness of having, we're going to change this verbiage in this particular ordinance to match the state, which happens a lot. This is a little bit different, but running parallel to this entire conversation. It happens quite frequently at the planning board that we change things, this word, that word, to match the state. Words have meaning, and those little nuances begin to tear away and move us further and further away from what perhaps was initially intended. I believe it's the right of the people of the town to be able to vote on ordinances and changes to ordinances, and suggesting that we're not really doing anything different isn't quite accurate. If we come out and state we are permissive, you will then continue to follow the rules and regulations of what is permissive and write future things in that permissive language. And I don't think we've ever come out and said that before. So I think it's bigger than what you're saying it is, if that makes sense. So I think it needs a whole lot more conversation and discussion than saying our attorney says it's better. It is, because it's much easier for the planning board to function under a permissive zoning ordinance than it is prohibitive. But I don't think that's a good reason to move that direction.
Okay, can I address some of your concerns? So I concur with you that the terminology is wacky. It is backwards, but it is defined that way in basically all the standard legal texts that I've seen on the subject. So making up a different terminology may just confuse things more, is my concern. Not trying to match the state here other than those two terminologies and have things be consistent. I hear your concern about, does it really change the tone of the ordinance? And I didn't originally see it that way, but I'm willing to, understand more about that and try to understand what your concern. I'm looking for specific examples if you have any of, what does it really change? Because I think my interpretation was, it is that it clarifies, for current and future residents, the intent of the document as is currently written on and has been voted on by Temple voters since 1972. I mean, every single ordinance in here has been a secret ballot vote by the residents, by the voters at that time. And there's a mix of things in there, and it's really just I thought it was just trying to clarify, hey, where there's a discrepancy, this is the intent, and if there's a concern about that, let's raise it up and talk about it. The reason I sort of brought this up this year is I would hate to see, a current landowner or a future landowner plan to do something with their property that they assumed could easily be done, spend money on plans and time and without actually understanding the nuances of the zoning law, which I'm still trying to figure out myself, and I don't expect anyone here to be an expert on. But where we have a legal opinion, rather get that up in front of people to begin with, so that there's less of a chance of misunderstanding, and start that conversation of, can I do this, and how do I go about getting this done, whether it's a simple building permit or whether it's a ZBA exception, just to make life, prevent people from assuming their interpretation of the document is different than a future board at the time. That's all.
Hi, everybody. I'm glad to be here. If you guys knew what I went through. So I don't really get involved in this deep stuff anymore, but I'm going to get involved in this one, and I'm going to get involved in a lot. There is going to be a change. I mean, we're asking to bless something that is actually bad for the town. So permissive, it actually is backwards language. It's not permitted. It's actually makes it harder. So you want an example? Murray needs an example. I don't know. I can do a basic example. I go to the selectmen, and the selectmen are anti-building, anti-me. They don't like me. Okay. And I'm doing something cool on my house. Should be fine. It's not bothering anybody. And they say, no, you can't do it because it's not in the zoning. It's not written. So we declare that we have all the power, and they would, because we're permissive, and I can't do it. So to think that that's going to stop court cases, that's not true either. The best example on that is there was a court case that caused this. We were permissive, and the Marsh family found out that we're permissive. And so so it doesn't stop any of that. Going back to what Deb said, there's only been, in my adult voting, there's only been one blatant, and I mean blatant, slap in our face zoning violator. It was the Messina case, 1999-ish, Temple Cabins. He was vicious to our town, okay? I would put the amount of money that we spent fighting him to about $1 million today. Okay, that doesn't mean it's ever going to happen again. It's just, it was a situation where he just beat us up. We were permissive then. Okay, I didn't even know we were permissive, because prohibitive means we vote on stuff, right? And all the zoning amendments we vote on in the booth. To me, that just makes us prohibitive. So some judge ruled that just because we vote on stuff in the booth, we're still permissive. I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a judge, but I'm going to vote no myself because I'm not going to do anything to bless something that we shouldn't be. I think we should retain our freedoms. And yeah, I know it's more work for the planning board, and you guys do plenty of work. I mean, I was on the planning board and that was nothing compared to what you got to do now. But you could do it subtly. We already have enough rules. They're not that hard to follow. There is some confusion because there should be like a guide, an actual guide. I mean, for us that are on the inn, if you will, from years of being here, I've done a lot of projects on my building down there in the corner. I know the steps to take, but I don't believe that somebody new to town would know those steps.
Right.
And the information isn't like easy, but I mean, you could make a handbook without changing all of the fundamental things of Temple to Freedom. And a little bit of vagueness, I think, makes Temple kind of groovy. And I have a house up north in a town that has 0 zone, none, nada, nothing. And when I got there, I had to ask the guy, what do I do? And he said, you dig your cellar right there. Is that your property? Yep. That's where you build your house. Okay. And they don't have any problems up there. So it does work. So we can remain vague. We can remain tranquil. And as far as the lawsuits and the going to court over zoning, it's so unfrequent. It's, we have a selectman here. I believe he could tell you, there's a lot of 2 selectmen. I believe he could tell you, both of those guys could tell you that usually it's just a conversation.
Mm.
They just go up to the person and say, it's kind of not good what you're doing. And normal people do normal things. They back it down. And then the last example of overreach, and I guess I'm going to bring it up for the rest of my life because I watched it. And I worry about when we vote for things that we don't go too far, is we watch some people really take the wood to Ben at Ben's Sugar Shack for 1.5 years. Okay. And it was awful. And that kid did nothing to violate zoning. And the whole idea of that was to wear him out, is my belief, on money. And Ben fooled them all because he's got deep pockets. And he didn't wear out, and he built a beautiful thing down there that's not hurting anybody. And I live right there. And so that's overreach. So when you get the wrong people in a situation, I know what you're saying, Murray, and I appreciate, and I love what you guys are going to do later on with the ADUs. I can't stay to watch it, but I'm all over that. It's wonderful. But if you get the wrong people on the board after we bless that, there's going to be way more court cases, because they could be mean to people. And so we don't want to bless it. We want to, I believe we should be working towards the prohibitive side. Thanks for your time.
Okay.
I'd like to say also that, I worked for the town for 23 years. My belief is education. I always encouraged people that called and asked if they could do something to come in and speak to the Board of Selectmen and either get the board's blessing or have the board send them to the zoning board. It's a matter of education. If our town employees and our town officials know what they're doing, and I know it's hard, but if they know what they're doing, we can avoid a lot of stuff. And I guess this is going to be a kind of a funny story, is when I first started working for the town, I got thrown into zoning the first week. And I started making phone calls to the town attorney, 5-10 minute phone calls saying, what does this mean? What does that mean? And we were in a meeting one time, and one of the board members at the time said, our legal bills have gone up. And the town attorney looked at him and said, you would have a lot higher legal bills if she was not calling me and asking the questions. So we shouldn't be afraid to make a short phone call to the town attorney and ask a question, because it could save us in the long run.
Hi, thank you for being here, doing this for us. It sounds to me, based on what little I've been able to glean from this, that permissive zoning has much narrower tolerances than prohibitive. So if we're implied permissive now, and if it's not really broken, Why do we want to fix it by making it more restrictive?
So again, the town council recommended this, which is not a great answer, but that's where it started this rolling. Right now, their interpretation of our zoning is that we allow anything. There's nothing prohibited. If you look at our special exception criteria, what we prohibit is things like duplexes, multifamily condominiums, these kinds of things. Any commercial is permitted. So that's all, that's in our zoning right now.
Thanks, Christina. So another example, I'm just gonna keep firing them, I guess, if I can. So we don't allow anything. We don't.
Can you
So-
give an example of something that you
Oh,
think
I'll
that's
give you,
not
I'll
on?
give you an awesome example. You're gonna
Please.
love this story. So I had, my, OG garage, when I started out in 88, was down on, Ken Quinn's house on 45. There's a little garage in there. That's where I started out. And so it burnt to the ground one night, right? So I had bought the corner, the Benatti corner there, and there's a little garage down on 101. So while my shop was being built, I just moved my shop into that garage, okay? Because I felt that was a hardship. And the selectmen issued me a cease and desist. One of the selectmen was my closest friend, Brian Colgren. I mean, we drank cocktails that night and I came over laughing about it because I ripped it up in front of Jim McTagg and called Bill Dresser and said, nice try. So, and he said, no, nice try, and I'll give you a month. So they threw down, they dealt with zoning, and that was 1994. So I'm not the only one that these guys have had to talk to. And I believe she'll tell you, there's been cease and desist issued. So you can't just do whatever you want. Now, I'm going to flip the other side. There is zoning violations in Temple. You can just drive around to see them. But what's really strange to me is, like, I'm not down on it, but the old Temple School, that's just one big zoning violation that was permitted. How do we permit 4 or 5 apartments in a building?
I think there's only 3.
Okay.
There's 3.
Or
That's
3.
right.
So do we permit that in our zoning? We don't do duplexes, so we do triplexes? So,
That was done by a special exception.
okay, but I'm just, my point is, so we have zoning in Temple. And just because the town council said that with the courts or something on that unique situation that probably will never, ever happen again, that is a completely unique situation up there. It's not enough for me to just jump on board, because what Amy just said is we don't want to vote. We don't want to take any chances to make things more restrictive. But you guys are right, we don't want to just say, hey, come to Temple and do whatever. But it's not true. We have laws, and we actually have, I kind of feel our zoning is a little restrictive. Off on the commercial end of it, 500 feet, you gotta be 500 feet from the nearest residence. Okay? You're gonna be 100 feet from the lot line for a commercial building. You know what Milford is? 15 feet from the lot line. 15 feet. We have 35 feet for a house. So, you know, we have pretty decent zoning.
We do
Yeah.
have mechanisms in place, though, if somebody wants to get a variance for those.
You can't be closer than 200. I don't care what your variance is on commercial. That's state fire marshal.
Yeah.
You can't just,
Mhm.
so this commercial, this thing, I think I was in a meeting once and somebody said Purdue Chicken could come to Temple. And I had to yell out, I'm pretty sure Frank Purdue is not going to run his trucks up here. I'm pretty sure. So, I mean, the fear is crazy. I mean, we bought a lot of land in Temple to protect ourselves from the school. And lo and behold, the most important thing for our town is not this. It's our school right now. And we should be focused 100% laser beamed eyes on that problem this year. And I just don't think we should be tackling another issue while we're dealing with that, while people also had a little bit of shock. There was a lot of people that had shock in their tax bills and that are not happy about that. So I'm just kind of hoping that you guys might like table this particular area and you know, the ADU thing helps Temple. I think it's wonderful, and really push that. And let's take a break from this. Let's step on a break from this particular thing.
I'll just add a little bit. Most people don't know me. I'm Simon Lecomte. I live over at 56 Webster Highway. So relatively new resident, been here 3.5 years. Coming to New Hampshire and to the town, I actually found what I could and could not do easy to understand by using, asking questions for the selectmen or people in the town from the town website. And I'm still a little bit confused at what problem we're trying to fix. So I understand, we've had some court cases and there's always going to be that rarity in society. That's just humans. But I think genuinely people are good people and they'll follow process. So we have an exception process if there needs to be a variance that works, right? And we've seen that in the town over many, many years. So, to Steve's point, I think there's more priorities that we should be focusing on in the town and where our tax dollars go in the school, et cetera. And, maybe this does become an issue again in 3 to 5 years and retable that then, but I don't see it as a priority right now.
Just correct me if I'm wrong. The most recent court case really came down to the difference of perspective of someone calling it a junkyard, which we explicitly say you can't have a junkyard, and someone feeling as though it's a historical museum of construction equipment.
I don't, know. Are we able to comment on that? Ken or George? It's, yeah. it's
So
still in court.
what I'm saying is though, it's most of that is public record.
It has been defined by the court as a junkyard.
That's what I'm
And-
saying.
And so just to clarify, we do allow junkyards, just not in wetlands or aquifers.
Correct. Yeah. Simply, that was a difference of perspectives and a lot more other things going on than what we typically will see here in the town of Temple.
Anybody from the board have any comments or questions?
I'll add a comment. I think that I personally struggle with this change because our zoning is both prohibitive and permissive. So to slap something on it that says that it is permissive is not true. And without going through our entire ordinance, that we should not be putting a blanket statement on the top. That's just my 2 cents.
That was more eloquent than what I had said to start with, where I said you're putting a stake in the ground, calling it permissive.
I've got one more question. Somebody had called me about this and asked if I was going to be at this meeting. And their question to me was, as an example, nothing in our zoning says that you can purchase a house and then rent it out. So if this statement is put in there, does that mean someone can be an absent landlord or not? Do they have to live in their house?
They do not have to live in their house.
I understand that, but it could be interpreted because it doesn't say in the zoning that you can own a house and rent it to somebody else.
No, but it does say in our zoning that it's primarily residential use.
Correct,
Yeah.
residential use.
Yeah.
But it could be interpreted that you have to be the one that's living there, unless it's an ADU, which is allowed.
Yeah, I'm not
I-
a lawyer, so I
I
don't
don't think,
think that.
I'm just saying that was the question that was asked of me.
Yeah.
I couldn't answer it.
there's no owner occupied discussion at all in
No.
either the zoning or it talks about, a residential structure.
There used to be owner occupied. I think it was taken out at one time.
May have been.
It regarded duplexes that allowed for a duplex, but it said that the owner had to live on one side of it.
Yeah, even the ADU says has to be owner occupied at the time of the building permit, but doesn't say they have to be there full time.
Comment. So one of the things that I've been struggling with, I'm fairly new here, Jim Adair's, is that, you know, we have right now an ordinance that's both permissive and prohibitive. So my takeaway is that we should work to get our ordinance one way or the other so that it's not mixed up like
Yeah.
that. But that kind of depends on making the decision which way it should go, number one. And number two, your comment, I don't know your name, about once we put permissive on there, that all our ongoing amendments or adjustments to the document would be based on that design, right? So if we say that it's a permissive, then as we write new things in there, it would be using that logic. So I think my takeaway is, I think we've got to just get a decision, ballot, whatever, on which way it should be permissive or prohibitive. And then we should work the document to align with that as we go. That's just my thoughts.
Amy?
So permissive zoning, there would be a list of things that we can do or that we can't do.
Can.
Can't,
Can.
can do. Okay.
Mhm.
Prohibitive, a list of things that we can't do.
Not
Okay.
necessarily. So I did some reading on prohibitive versus permissive zoning ordinances in New Hampshire today. And by the way, Steve pointed out, there's a number of towns that don't have zoning at all. So I couldn't find any that declared themselves to be prohibitive, but I spent an hour on it, so not a thorough job. But there is, the New Hampshire Office of Planning and Development does a survey every year, and they keep track of different changes in different ordinances. And I couldn't find anything on their survey data, but again, doesn't mean it doesn't exist. I just couldn't find it. So what I read today is, this is from their site, and it cites, I think, 4 legal cases that helped them make this determination. It says most zoning ordinances in New Hampshire are the so-called permissive variety. That is, in the absence of a variance or special exception, such an ordinance functions generally to prohibit uses of land unless they are expressly permitted as primary uses or can be found to be accessory to a permitted use. The rule of accessory use is in response to the impossibility of providing expressly by zoning ordinance for every possible lawful use. Even under a permissive ordinance, a given use may be allowed, even if it is not explicitly allowed. Those types of uses are said to be accessory to the use that is expressly permitted. So most ordinances expressly provide for some accessory uses, although the common law provides for them when the ordinance is silent on the matter. So it just I think I looked at one town that basically has that in their zoning, and then it says, if you have a question, just ask. That they offer the flexibility. So you don't have to have a list, because it would be a really difficult task to come up with a list on either side. I have the copies if anybody wants copies of that, but
I think one example we discussed as a board last week was, and it was before my time in town, but it was the time when a large wind farm was proposed on the ridge behind here. And at that time, there was no mention of wind farms in our zoning. So it would be considered a standard structure, industrial, that would go through the ZBA for approval. With the standard setbacks in existence in our zoning at that time. So, full size, wind generator farm 35 feet from the nearest property line, or 100 or 200 feet from the nearest residence, depending on its allocation. that spawned a fury of activity within the planning board at that time to write some detailed sections that are in our zoning today that talk about large wind farm rules, and they have different setbacks that are appropriate, and small wind farm activities, which are more appropriate of what a residential person would put in. But while those were in process, if the application had been filed before the town voted on them, they're null and void for that application. So that application would apply to the zoning rules in effect at the time of application, not the ones under development that got through quickly, 12 to 18 months, somewhere there. I'm thinking I'm trying to paraphrase. If something like this is adopted, which says, hey, if it's not explicitly written in and prohibited at that time, it'd be pretty clear to the applicant, okay, wind farms are not listed in the list of approved things. I've got to go talk to someone. I've got to go figure out what the rules are. And then because it's not allowed, but they're going through the process of applying for it to be allowed, it gives the town some flexibility to react. Now, we don't know what technology is going to happen next. We've got a strong wind farm ordinance. There was a flurry of activity after that on gas compressor stations. I'm not sure our zoning can even talk about that because it's a utility. But think about the next technology that we haven't thought of yet that might show up on your doorstep. And we don't know enough today to put in, hey, you shouldn't have a fusion reactor plant as your next door neighbor because that technology doesn't exist today. It might 30 years from now, and be regulated as not a public utility. And I can't imagine what else might be there. So one of the reasons that the lawyer recommended putting some of this language is to think about and protect the town against those uses, whether residential, industrial, that we don't even think of yet that would come in the future. Now I can say, hey, it's probably never going to happen in Temple. And that may be very well true. But it's happening, but unintended uses or unexpected uses are happening in our neighboring towns. Because their zoning, is absent or allows for it, but wasn't anticipated to happen. So it's purely, it's the sort of the level of protection current landowners and residents want as a balance against the flexibility and the use of current landowner and residents' rights to use their land in different ways. Yes, Steve?
Hey, so what you just described, here's the confusion. You just described in detail what prohibitive looks like. You think up things that can happen, you give them to the taxpayers and the taxpayers vote for it. That's not permissive, that's prohibitive.
Say it again, Steve.
You just described a prohibitive zoning style where you guys, as a think tank, say, wow, down in Wilton, they just went through this. We don't want that. So we got to figure out some zoning.
Correct.
For the taxpayers to vote on. That's prohibitive.
Correct.
So that once again, I'm all over that, man. I want prohibitive.
Right.
So I want a big old no on permissive. Because what you just said is the right way. Let the taxpayers decide. And you guys are, the planning board, well, everybody, the whole citizens could, because anybody could come into the planning board and say, hey, you see what happened over to Charleston, or we don't want that. And, that's I think would be awesome as a prohibitive style zone.
And
permissive is just, hey, we don't like you, you're not doing it.
Yeah.
And as
we
far
can
as
do that, and it's just by having to follow the standard calendar processes of getting in front of the town meeting.
Yeah, well, so I mean, you're making a decision, should permissive, so
Right.
you're gonna, so it just comes down to, were you gonna react or be reactive? And so you can be prohibitive and react. You don't have to wait. We already have pretty decent zoning, or we could be permissive and just hope that somebody doesn't get upset at somebody and cause a court case.
Yeah,
Or another thing is, who's going to enforce permissive anyway? What group of people are going to look over fences? Or the neighbor goes, hey, selectman, I don't like my neighbor and he's doing something that might be wrong. And I don't see it in the zoning, so I want you to stop him. So now when the selectmen don't stop him, does he sue the town for not stopping him? or does the landowner sue the town for being stopped? Okay, so that is so vague, and like we should be working towards prohibitive. So it's just black and white. This is what you can do, and that's it. Because now, what is the word? Ambiguity? Oh, yeah, covered, full of it. You can't.
So just realize, I'll address I'll try to address your first concern, your first comment. And yes, what I described is a way to react to a prohibitive zoning change and make it happen. Just realize that, if a person in town applies to the planning board or the ZBA to start the process of doing something that the town would like to prohibit in the future, and the town goes through the process of 6 months of drafting the article up and waiting till the March town meeting and getting it voted on, that doesn't apply to the application that's already in process. It applies to future ones. It can't affect the application that was applied for relevant to the zoning laws in effect on that day. So yes, yeah, just realize there's a risk to the town in that situation.
So.
Yeah, yes, please,
Yeah.
just because we have people listening online. Thank you.
So here's another example. I've been here for a while, maybe too long. So, when I was doing my project down on the corner, there was some people kind of didn't want it to happen. So in 1994. So, one of the things that were hoping to stop me at the end was site plan review. As you guys all know what that is. That was adopted because of my project from some people that didn't like my project.
That is true.
And so the argument with town council, and my attorney is, does he have to go through it? Because it's a new thing, but I started my process with the planning board and the ZBA. Should he have to go through site plan review? So one legal counsel said, yeah, the other said, no. So instead of just getting into that, what I did is, sure, I'll go through it. And because, like I said, normal people that like their town and everything just do normal things. The planning board said, well, I think it was his father said, we'll do site plan review light, which I don't even know if there is even such a thing, but I went through the site plan review process. I just thought that, why
Voluntarily.
yeah, I volunteered. Why rock the boat? But so going back to the whole zoning,
What it is George was on the board with me at that time, and my late father, and you volunteered, but we moved the goalposts in the middle of the game, which you normally cannot do, but you allowed us to. And so you volunteered, and we then adopted site plan review.
But to
And like
Murray's
my
point-
dad said, we kind of took it easy on you. He called it site plan review light. But you were the reason why we have site plan review, or
My
what we
point is,
eventually would have got
that
it.
could have gone to court, just that one topic. And so
could've.
it can happen.
It could have.
So that doesn't avoid court either.
Yeah.
And everything that you guys are doing doesn't avoid court. If somebody just got deep pockets and they're just that type of person, we're going to court. It's just the way it is. And we can't just change everything because we're worried about going to court. You're going to run into people. And I'm telling you, the guy down there at Temple Cabin, he could care less what anybody up there had to say. He was doing what he was doing, and that's it. That's all it was to it. And I mean, he violated every single thing there was to violate. And he just ran out. What he did is he ran out the clock on the taxpayers. We just got sick of paying taxes for the legal. I mean, you figure, I think just for, not to get too far in the weeds with money, I think the town was only worth like 45 million, not the 290 million it is now. And we had a $70,000 legal bill, right? I think it's pretty close to the math. And that's like a big hit. I mean, that's over $1 in your taxes just for that one guy. And he didn't care. I mean, he really didn't care. So, I mean, so what I'm just cautioning, you guys are doing all the wonderful things, but we don't have to keep going to fix something that isn't broken out of maybe worrying about a hypothetical that maybe never happened. And all of the history has proven that it's been okay. Except once down there, once. And that guy, I don't think you're ever gonna meet somebody like him again.
Is there anybody else in the audience before we move on with the hearing to some of the other topics? And, in the discussion on permissive zoning, is there anybody else that wanted to speak? In regards to that? Because I think just as a matter of time, we've been 50 minutes on permissive zoning. We do have the rest of the hearing to go over and some other things. So anybody else on the board have any other last minute, last words? Okay. Good.
Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Okay, so that would be the potential first ballot question. The second one we would be under Article 4 general provisions would be Section 4 off-street parking. So it would be each new dwelling unit shall provide a suitable parking space for at least 2 vehicles, garage and driveway included. And that change would be what is existing now is 4 vehicles. So we would take that minimum down to 2 vehicles, or ask that the town vote to make it 2 vehicles. Any questions about that? Deb?
I don't disagree with that. I'm just, what's the reasoning for it?
A couple things. One is a burden on the prospective homeowner to have that many spaces. That's really the biggest thing. And this, as Pam, I don't know if you want to speak to this too, but we had the housing committee's steering committee, and the next several are all out of the input that they gathered from the community. So did you want to speak to that, Pam, at all, or?
Sure, or Carter, it doesn't
Or
matter,
Carter,
either
sorry.
of us. I'll just do this one. Within our year of the housing committee, year plus of the housing committee, on the different topics, that one was one that came up more frequently. And again, it's an extra burden especially with building a new home, dependent upon how far back you are from the road. You have to make certain that you have enough for 4 parking stalls at all times. That also would apply to, if we were to allow duplexes, that would mean 8. If we allow, and I'm just extrapolating so you understand where it goes. Multi-dwelling, if we've got 3 or 4 down here in the elementary school, it should mean that there are at least 12 parking stalls down there. It was a school. There's parking stalls. I get it. But I'm just saying, so 4 for every dwelling. And the opinion was it seemed a little archaic and expensive for folks who are trying to build new, especially. Carter? It wasn't a huge sampling. We did 11 events in a year. So it wasn't for lack of trying. But
Plus
that
interviews.
one did come up more frequently than others.
Okay. So another question, just so I'm getting it straight in my mind, because I noticed that you're going to, with the ADUs. So that would be, if you have an ADU, you would actually need like 4 parking spaces. And if you had an attached ADU and a detached ADU, you'd need 8. No, if this were to go through, you need a total of 6. Okay, I'm just trying to get it straight.
So that will be the ballot question on off-street parking. The next section, 7 multiple dwellings. The intent of this section is to allow homeowners to generate extra income, elderly individuals to have caretakers or renters share a home, and to provide affordable housing in Temple. So accessory dwelling units are permitted in all residential districts. Our current zoning says that one accessory dwelling unit may be attached or detached as allowed by section 7 or section 7B. Our proposed new would be one attached and one detached accessory dwelling unit permitted per lot, provided they conform to the standards set forth in section 7A or section 7B.
So, if you have a 3-acre lot, right now you can have an attached ADU. If this goes through, you can have an attached and a detached.
So the confusion on this is that right now it says one accessory dwelling unit may be attached or detached as allowed by section 7A or 7B.
Right.
And so that can be interpreted in two different ways. It can be interpreted as you can have one or the other, or you can have one and the other. That's how it was interpreted by people that have approached us. So we said, well, what's the original intent behind this? And I think Bruce, you checked in with some former board members who said the original intent was one attached and one detached.
But the caveat is that our current zoning says you have to have double the lot size.
Right.
That's my question is
Right.
the current zoning says you can have attached on a 3-acre lot. You can have a detached on a 6-acre lot. In the rural
Or
district.
10-acre lot in the mountain or. yeah,
Right,
yeah,
right.
yeah.
So whatever your lot size is. So that's where I'm getting confused on this.
So they still have to meet the other requirements for septic and water and setbacks and all of those other things. So
But you are correct. This removes that requirement of acreage.
this particular
This-
proposed one does not. The one that removes the
Further
acreage is
down.
later.
It does.
Okay.
They're addressing the.
This one is just to clarify the intent of that one accessory dwelling unit and one detached accessory dwelling unit would be permitted per lot. That doesn't affect the acreage part. That's a separate question.
But it's in there.
Yes.
Yeah, so, but playing devil's advocate, if the amendment that we're recommending to omit the requirement for the double the lot size actually failed, and we continued on as we are now with the double the lot size, then that would, this actually would contradict that.
No, it still
No.
applies. Still applies.
It's
That's
still-
why it's separate. Yeah.
That's, so you would be able to look under section 7.
They could have one attached and one detached,
If
but
they-
to have the detached, they would still have to have double the acreage.
It just doesn't say that there, but it
Right,
refers to
because
the
it's a
section.
Separate
Yeah,
section
yeah,
of our
yeah,
zoning.
yeah.
That's why.
Yep. Okay, so the
Does
next,
that answer your question?
What is it that you're not getting?
I guess I'm getting confused in that the way I'm reading that is that you could end up with 3 residential
Correct.
correct.
on one property.
That attached ADU and a detached ADU,
Mhm.
whereas the way it's read now, there would only be 2. You would
Right,
have your main
that-
house in either.
Either one or the
attached
other.
Or detached, so it adds the possibility of a third.
Okay, so, right.
all
And
the others.
everything.
There's fish. So another question, I'm sorry if I'm being dense, but another question is, what if you have a pre-existing lot of record that is less than the 3 acres? Where does that go?
Pre-existing.
Pre-existing lot of record that's less than 3, that's non-conforming, less than 3 acres.
Or
Thank you. Yeah.
I can give you an example of one that actually happened in town. It's a pre-existing lot that is a few feet short of 300 feet road frontage. And they wanted to do a detached ADU up back on an old gravel road that is no longer It's not a class 6. It's nothing. It was a sand pit. They were denied to be able to put a detached, even though they have the acreage, they were denied to put a detached ADU for their son, daughter-in-law, and child in their back, way away from their house, because they were a few feet short. And by few, I want to say it was less than 5 feet short. It was like 3 feet
So
short
they were
of the.
denied by the zoning board?
Mhm.
I think that would happen anyway. If it was a blank lot and it was shy of the dimensional requirements, you couldn't put a new house there, even if it was, that's why people ask for variances. Because it's silly to say, I have 298 feet of frontage. And so you go for variance and say, hey, look, I mean, I've done that in other towns, asked for variances because a couple feet short of frontage is silly, and then.
But that doesn't, I mean, it doesn't really have to do with what we're talking about here, because that would be a special exception that they would have to go through a variance to get. That doesn't have to do with this particular zoning.
However, if it's a pre-existing lot of record that's non-conforming and you're putting one residence on, you don't have to get a variance in Temple.
But I think the ADUs, I don't think we're saying that you could have 3 units on there because it wouldn't meet the septic rules. It wouldn't meet all the other stuff anyways. There would be lot loading requirements for a septic system, well radii, because now you have 3 units as opposed to just 1. So there's a lot of other reasons why it wouldn't work anyways. But I think the way I'm looking at it is that if it's an existing lot of record and there's 1 house and it's a 1/4 acre, you can't have 3 units on that lot. I just don't think that works physically.
It's a good point, though. It's not one that has been discussed.
And how is someone who's buying the property, even though you've been asked that question?
Use the microphones.
They would look at the zoning in our town before they build their house. That's what they should do.
They would find out during the building permitting process.
During the what?
Building permitting process.
If it's a non-conforming lot.
Yeah, I think you would be silly to purchase anything with plans on doing something different and buy it first and then go, oh, now here's what I want to do and find out the rules don't allow.
I was assuming it was a non-conforming lot with a home on it already.
So yeah, so I do
And with
know,
buying that.
I know of one pre-existing non-conforming lot that had a house built on it in 1990, 1.23 acres. And because I built it, I owned it. And I sold it in 2012. The gentleman, the family that bought it, the couple that bought it, went to the zoning board of adjustment and actually got a special exception and built a 2-car garage with an in-law apartment above it on that 1.23 acres. And it's, obviously there to this day. So it has been approved. The ZBA has allowed that, has set that precedent for small non-conforming lots, but they had to meet the septic requirements and, upgrade the septic system to add for a bedroom. So there's things they had to do, but the end of Moran Road. Yeah. Yeah. So does that answer the non-conforming?
For the moment.
So I guess not to jump around, but we probably should go discuss next the 6th, go from 3 because they're related, 3 to 6, which would be detached accessory dwelling units, removal of double acreage requirement, clarifications and simplification of maximum square footage permitted per unit, and addition of language to be consistent with EDU. Okay, so where's 6 in this? Article 4, Section 7.
Yeah, so just look at the detached accessory dwelling unit sections.
Yeah, detail. Okay, right there. Okay. Yep.
So,
Yep.
yeah, it's removing the double acreage.
Yep. So 1 detached accessory dwelling unit shall be permitted per lot. So we're removing a detached accessory dwelling unit shall be permitted on lots that are at least twice the minimum lot size. And adding one detached accessory dwelling, it should be permitted per lot. The owner must be a legal resident of the property at the time of the building permit application.
So the reason for adding that is it was under attached dwelling and was not under detached, and so this is just to be consistent.
Consistent. And then, so currently it states the detached accessory dwelling unit shall have a minimum living area of 400 square feet, but in no case shall the living area comprise more than 67% of the living area of the larger dwelling unit, provided that the detached accessory dwelling unit living area may not exceed 1,200 square feet. We're proposing to eliminate that and add the living area of the detached accessory dwelling unit shall comprise of no more than 67% of the living area of the larger primary dwelling unit, or 1,500 square feet, whichever is less.
And probably the important change there is there's no minimum size of a detached accessory dwelling unit, if I understand that correctly.
Right. And so what we brought up so 1,500 square feet, you're for the normal house in town, that's 1,800, 2,000 square feet. That's that's pretty generous. But look, we've joked around, if Tom Brady moved to Temple and wanted to build an 8,000 square foot house, he wouldn't want to just have a 1,500 square foot accessory dwelling unit. So the mechanism would be to go to, as it says here, larger detached accessory dwelling units may be granted through a variance from the ZBA.
And our zoning ordinance currently has a bunch of bullet points underneath this formula for calculating for, the former language, which was really confusing. And it was different between attached and detached. So again, this is just to be consistent between the two.
Yeah. I think the one nuance to catch right in the beginning, because it goes right to your point, is instead of saying at the beginning of that, detached ADUs shall be permitted on lots that are at least twice the minimum lot size for the district. So a 5.5 acre lot in the residential district would not qualify. That's changed to one accessory dwelling unit shall be permitted per lot. So an existing lot of 2 acres under this ordinance would be allowed a detached ADU. An existing lot. Yeah.
No, but could you repeat that? You
Yeah,
said
so
because originally it says that you could have 2 ADUs, but what you just stated is one.
One
one
detached.
detached.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
So,
This is the detached, the regulations of the detached
Okay.
portion.
so I have another quick question. Is some of this in response to the way the state is going regarding ADUs?
These are based on requests we've had from residents in town who have not been able to do ADUs because they couldn't meet our zoning.
Okay, well, because the state's,
So in response to
The HOP
feedback
grant.
from the HOP grant.
Yeah.
steering.
uh,
There were 3 areas, I don't know, Pam, if you want to add to this, but there were 3 areas that came up high in the feedback we got from residents. It was the ADUs, which we've addressed here, and also the multifamily, which conversions, which we'll get to. So these are specifically in response to the work that was done by the steering committee.
okay, I'm just asking because the state is looking at doing changes to the RSAs
Yes.
that would override zoning that doesn't allow this type of thing.
Right, and we already allow some of the things that
Okay.
they're looking at.
So,
And in the other thing, George had come in one meeting with a unique, it was a pretty neat union leader article on towns in our area that
It was a ledger.
maybe it was, yeah, but anyway, it was amazing the amount of towns that are working on ADUs in the state of New Hampshire, overwhelming, and they're all relaxing their zoning to try to help in the housing crisis. So what we're doing is really in line with what a lot of the other towns are doing in our area.
And because we've had requests from residents as well.
And yeah, yep. So then attached accessory dwelling units. The owner must be a legal resident of the property at the time of building permit. So what we're, similar to the detached, what we're proposing to do is get rid of the part that says an accessory dwelling unit shall have a minimum of 400 square feet, but in no case shall the living area comprise of more than 40% of the living area of the larger dwelling unit, provided that the living area may not exceed 1,200 square feet. And we want to replace that with the living area of the accessory dwelling unit shall comprise of no more than 40% of the larger primary dwelling unit or 1,200 square feet, whichever is less. Larger attached accessory dwelling units may be granted through a variance of the ZBA.
So again, that removes the strict minimum. And it allows for larger, allows for a building permit up to 1,200 square feet or 40% of the size, or approach the ZBA for a variance if you want something bigger. There's a lot more flexibility in the attached ED.
And both the attached and detached also, one of the stipulations, you have to have adequate provisions shall be made for additional off-street parking for 2 vehicles, and subsequent condominium or other conveyance of any accessory dwelling unit separate from that of the principal dwelling shall be prohibited. So in other words, you can't have a house in a detached and you can't sell your detached. It's
Well, you could sell your detached if you had appropriate frontage
And acreage.
and acreage.
Oh,
But then
Yes.
you're going through
And
subdivision.
that would be.
You would have to subdivide it, but
Ve-
in theory, you could.
in theory, if you had 6 acres and you had a primary house on 3 of the acres and on the other 3 you had a detached and you had 600 feet of frontage, 300 for each lot, you could go and
250-foot square.
and you meet all the other the
Setbacks.
septic, and you could,
It's a
in
sub-
theory, you're right, you could come in to us and apply for a subdivision and you could
And, yeah,
then sell off one of those.
separate septic.
You
and
could.
all. Yeah.
True. Okay, so then, going back to residential conversions. Residential conversions to multifamily dwellings are only permitted through conversion of a residential building in existence prior to March 30th, 2025, as allowed by section 7C in all residential districts.
And that one would only be included if 7C passed. And 7C is the requirements.
What exactly does that mean?
It means if you have a large house, like say an old farmhouse, they referred to them sometimes as big house, little house, back house, barn. That you could put 3 units in if it still meets the setbacks and, has adequate septic, has adequate water, then you could do that, but it's only for existing structures, not for new. Does that answer?
Yep. I need to understand this stuff.
Sure, of course. That's the point of having these things.
Well, I may have.
And then our final amendment would be in regards to the Board of Adjustment. And specifically, it would be about appointments of alternates to make us comply with the state statute.
This was a petition warrant article last year, and it was contradictory to the state statute. So this is just to, the spirit of the petition warrant article is still there. The changes only apply to alternates, and basically it just says the ZBA appoints their own alternates. They're not elected.
But they still have to be approved by the Board of Selectmen, right?
I don't believe so. I think it's different for land use boards.
Oh.
Yeah.
That's
Yep.
so. Can I ask you guys another question? And it's actually not any of your zoning amendments. But would you look at revisiting the 250-foot square that's required to be on a subdivision and require that the house has to be built in that 250-foot square? Because there was a minor subdivision that was done. The 250-foot square was in wetlands, and they just barely made the 35-foot setbacks on either side. And their well is actually, their 75-foot well radius goes across the street. And there have been instances in this town where wells have had to be replaced. Luckily, it was by the state, not the town, because the wells were contaminated with salt from the road.
Debbie, maybe I can help you with that. I think the 250-foot square was so that you weren't building a triangular lot.
Or a bowling alley lot.
Right, so
That was-
that didn't mean they had to have the house set in that, as long as it had 35-foot setbacks from the property lines.
Well, this particular lot is basically got a bowling alley and then opens up in the back, and the house is on the bowling alley.
We can certainly look at it again.
I'm more concerned about the well
Yeah. But we
crossing the
can,
street.
yeah.
That doesn't seem
yeah,
like.
but when
Well,
we
it's
adopt,
not in the street, but
Yeah.
the, well,
Radius.
75-foot radius goes
that doesn't
across the
seem
street
like
and
that
onto the,
Yeah.
actually onto the property of an abutter.
Doesn't seem
Yeah.
like that should have been allowed.
Hmm.
I think the state.
No, we can look at that again. I know that, you were on the board probably with my dad back when they adopted the reason why was,
My house.
you're, yeah, where Russ lives on the Sharon line, there's 4 or 5 lots there and
Yeah.
they're all very, very narrow bowling alley.
yeah, I
lots.
know.
So when that subdivision, after that happened, I think that was the reason why we adopted that 250-foot square, so you
Right.
wouldn't have those types of lots.
Right, but I think that if you have the 250-foot square, it shouldn't be in the wetlands and the house is in a bowling alley.
Well, we certainly can
Yeah.
put it on our plate to look at. All right, well, I think unless there's any other questions about the hearing, I want to close the hearing.
Bruce, just a second, you didn't,
Go ahead,
you-
Frank.
I don't think you caught section 7C, which is sort of the rules or the conditions of the conversions.
Oh, yes. Sure.
Just to make sure we're covering.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, we kind of.
Yeah, we did. Yeah, well, it's weird because
Because it's under the first section and then it has its own section with the requirements.
yeah, exactly. Yep. So yeah, 7C residential conversions, to multifamily, would be permitted under the following conditions. Site plan approval must be obtained by the planning board. There's only one existing residential structure on the lot.
So no detached ADUs.
The owner must be legal residents of the property at the time of the building permit. Residential conversions to a multifamily dwelling must be developed in a manner which does not alter the character or appearance of the existing dwelling. The maximum number of dwelling units in a multifamily conversion shall be 3. Additional dwelling units may be granted through a variance of the ZBA. Adequate provisions for off-street parking are made per section 4 of the zoning ordinance, and no more than 2 parking spots shall be visible from the public street. Written approval for septic capacity or a state-approved plan is required. A copy of the approval must be filed with the building permit. Written approval of adequate water supply must be filed with a building permit. The building permit for a multifamily conversion must be approved and issued prior to the construction of the units. Dwelling units are not to be used or rented as transient quarters, and the right to rent or sublet shall not be permitted for periods less than 30 days. Subsequent condominium or other conveyance of the dwelling unit in a multifamily conversion is prohibited. So doable, but with our proposal, it's doable, but there are restrictions. So I guess I would liken this to the Temple Elementary School, the brick school with the 3 units in it. They went through site plan review when they did that. And just a side note, the owner of that building never lived in Temple and doesn't live there now. But
Precisely why this should be carefully considered, because when I look at something like this, I think of investors that are going to take interest in the town to convert them to multifamily dwellings. I don't think this is a decision that should be taken lightly by the town.
So Carter, just to clarify, your comment is you like, or you're suggesting we really make sure that the owner is a legal resident at the time of the permit to.
I'm suggesting we don't adopt this ordinance. Because it's going to lead to, we have big old farmhouses, right? And if that becomes, we take the ability to convert that into a 3-family, multifamily house, the value of that property has nothing to that investor that comes in from the outside. So that just leads to subdivision, loss of rural space and our character that we care about in town. That is my opinion.
Can I just, sorry,
just
can I add? So I'd just like to concur, having been 4 years into restoring 56 Webster Highway, big old farmhouse. I think if you're going to consider adopting this, you should consider what is the historical significance to the property of the town. Because when we bought that house, that was the first thing we looked at. It was built in 1783 by the founder of the town, Major Ephraim Harold. And I think if we convert these into multifamily homes, we start to lose the significance and the ambiance of the town.
There's an interesting case I was made aware of last week in Milford at the moment, where one of the oldest farmhouses in Milford is going to be destroyed, or has within the last week, near the Hitchner facility, or Hendricks Cable and Wire facility. A good friend of mine grew up in that house as a single family home with a connection to a barn, to a big barn, built in the 1700s. And he tried to convince the State Historical Society and the Milford Historical Society, hey, there's value in this oldest house in Milford, farmhouse, fully intact farmhouse remaining. And the state came in and did a survey of the interior and said, no, because it's been cut up into apartments, it has no historic value anymore, and refused to stop the destruction. His personal story, I'm just relaying that, but that sort of resonates with your concern.
I think I'd like to concur with Carter as well, because if you look at some of the historic houses in Greenville, they've been cut up into apartments. And they may have been owner occupied at the time, but then they were sold. They have absentee landlords, and they have a lot of issues. Not to say that we would, but it's something to consider.
Anybody else have anything to add to residential conversions?
Yeah, my only thought would be, or concern would be, that if you don't allow that subdivision, not subdivision, the corporation, and I'm not advocating this, I'm just saying that what is the possibility that the place ends up not being owned, not being occupied, and ends up destroyed in the end because it hasn't been cared for, because nobody can afford to heat it or maintain it. And again, I'm just throwing that out there. But
As somebody who bought a historic farmhouse, yes, it costs money to renovate that, but it's not impossible. So.
If you're a senior on fixed income and you're living in a big old family house, it is cost prohibitive.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why we have a attached ADU option to allow for that income potential in somebody's property. I just struggle with, I can see this being outside investor owned properties, and I certainly feel for the person trying to stay in their home, but I'm not sure that's going to be the use case that we see most.
Yeah, it's a tough one. so I own a 1800 farmhouse right here in the village. And it was converted, the brick side was converted into its own apartment sometime in the early 80s, I think. And I live on the old post and beam wood side, but the point is, so I rent out an apartment on the brick side. And if someday I wanted to retire to Florida for 6 or 7 months in the winter and rent out my side, is that okay?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That,
Yes.
but if I wanted to permanently move out of town and rent it out as income, yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's still doing
So,
that.
so I think it's not, I don't, but it's the investor we're worried about, I think, right? It's the,
Yeah, I
See
guess
coming
my,
in.
my concern is not the person trying to stay in their home, because I believe they could do an attached ADU or a detached ADU to help with that. It's not going to fix everything, but my concern is that big old farmhouses and properties will then further be, subdivided down and create apartments with absentee landlords. And that is my biggest concern here.
so would the alternative be just to keep things the way they are now? Because as they are right now, the applicant would go to the ZBA, similar to what happened with the old brick school,
Right.
and the ZBA granted them 3 apartments.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is a case by case basis.
And none of these other things would apply except they'll sell the water and septic. Oh,
So Carter, I do share your concern, and that's one of the reasons, I think we talked to maybe a month ago about adding that the owner must be a legal resident at the time of building permit, specifically to prevent the case where a large farmhouse comes up for sale and individual owners who may want to buy it to rehab it are outbid by the absentee landlord who can gain the value of, has the money to invest.
But who's
into-
enforcing that?
Into 3 or 4 and then gain the value of it. But
Nobody's
it's only,
enforcing
but I
that.
agree, it's only at the time of application.
Right.
So it's not a permanent.
It's not helpful.
it still has to go for site plan review.
Okay,
Yeah.
there's a question.
So just want to
Yeah.
reinforce an example of what you said. When we bought 56 Webster Highway, there was a previous offer the week before us who wanted to convert that into 3 apartments. And the Marie's, Alan and the family said no to that offer because they knew our offer was to restore the property. So it was on the previous owners. They saw the value in the property. They saw our vision that we wanted to move here, live here, retire here, grow old, and restore the property. And I think just coming back to the significance of the old farmhouses, and you can't build these houses anymore. We have to do what we can do to protect them, because we're just a custodian of 56, right? My daughter will hopefully move there, my granddaughter, etc. But for someone to go build that house today, that's a couple of $1 million. And the money's not there for the average person to do it, or the workmanship today.
I would just like to advocate for, I work with the agencies that are working with families and individuals who are looking for housing. And I feel like I just need to represent their voice at this table, is that there are people living in their cars, there are people doubling up. And it's not because they can't afford a place, it's because there's nothing available. And that includes young people as well, who are here to work. There's businesses that can't hire employees because they can't find a place to live. And so this offers those people an opportunity to live in a community like ours and get involved. I mean, we've had long-term renters in our town. I'm thinking of Tammy down at the school, who was here for a very long time and ingrained in the community and really active and contributed a lot and worked at the elementary school. So just because someone is renting an apartment in a nice town doesn't mean they're going to trash the place. I hear the investor concerns, which is, I think, why we put in, this owner occupied at the time of the building permit. You can't change the character of the house. That would protect the historic value. I've tried to put in, these are pretty strict requirements for a residential conversion, more strict than in some other towns that I've looked at. And the reason is to address some of these concerns. So I hope, based on the positive feedback that came in over the year, that others will also see the value of this this is a compromise. It's really a drop in the bucket. But if it gets a few people into housing and contributing to our community, I think it's worth it. That's my opinion. Houses can be restored. And it's, it's expensive to do that.
Yeah.
And I have, sorry, were you, no, I was just gonna say, I have adult children who have said to me, I can't move back home. I can't afford it. I can't come back to the place where I grew up, even if I wanted to. And my kids both work. One's a police officer and the other's a teacher. They can't afford to live here unless they move in with me. And that was not my retirement plan. Go ahead.
I'd also like to address sort of the same thing. I have a business on West Road and my kids are all working for me. And as long as they lived at home, it all works out. But, or if they lived in town close by, and, we're coming up with a problem now is they can't find any place to rent. It's either affordable or close by. So 2 have just moved to Keene and 2 are in Peterborough. And so now comes up the question, well, now you got a 45-minute commute to get to work every morning and nobody has a car. So am I losing employees? Whereas if there was somebody, a house just down the road, it would still work out. And as far as the concerns about an outside developer coming and buying a house and converting it and then subdividing all the land and they can do that anyways. You don't need to, if the land is subdividable and you have enough acreage, anyone can come and buy the land. Lots of times what they do is tear down.
My point with that, Russ, is it becomes when you have a 3-apartment old farmhouse, you no longer need the land associated with that. So it leads to subdivision. Not that yes, that can happen anyways, but if it is a multifamily building, its primary purpose is to generate income for an investor.
I can see that. I don't see that is a driving factor, because if the house is for sale, the land isn't needed now anyways. If somebody's selling their house and they're getting rid of it.
Land can't be replaced once it's developed.
No, but that could happen anyways, is what I'm saying. Whether you allowed 3 units in the existing farmhouse and maybe say, look, if you have the 3 units, why would you bother going through all the rest of that to subdivide? If you were a big developer, you'd tear down the house and put in some single family houses, which would make a lot more money than redeveloping and fixing up an old house that needs a lot of infrastructure for only 3 rental units.
Yeah.
That doesn't make, financially, that doesn't make sense. You would tear down the house.
I still don't think it's a wise idea for our town to adopt that.
Yeah, for any bigger investors, I would not be looking at restoring a farmhouse.
No.
But for people in your community, I think it would be a good thing if you could have 3 units in a farmhouse. But you shouldn't have to be technically a resident at that location in that.
But yeah, I think that,
Yeah. Grab a mic if you wanted to
yeah.
say more, but yeah.
Well, I agree. For instance, if I had the money to buy a house in town, I would do that and make it apartments for my kids. I mean, look, there you go. You're in town, you're not in my house, and you're close by, and that's all good. And that's kind of the crux of why I think this is a good idea, because other people, we all, maybe we're all too old in this town and nobody has kids, but I kind of think that's not the case. And maybe people moving here might have kids and they don't want their kids to go, maybe not live with them forever, but they don't want them far away. And that makes a community when you have a bunch of people that are all related and have grown up together and went to school. When all you have is a bunch of people that have all moved here from other places who have all their own ideas, and it makes less of a community. I'm more of a community oriented person, I guess.
The other thing I was going to add to that same thing is sometimes it's also about being near your support system. If, you know, if you have a building that is multiple units, this is the way people lived back in the old days, right? I mean, the reason we have big house, little house, back house, barn is because when families, when their kids grew up and had kids, they moved to a different part of the house. That this is how it's done in a lot of places around the world. Families live together in the same house historically.
I think though that this is like putting on rose-colored glasses to say that this is going to be multi-generational housing. It might be initially, it might be to start, but it won't be as 10, 20, 30 years from now. That won't be the case.
If kids can't afford a place to live, it might be.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sensitive to the historic value of homes, the old homes of 1700, particularly the 1800s, but even I'm in my 50s, George, you're in your 80s, we've both been here our whole life. And I think, you know, we can probably count, you know, not on a few hands, but it's not that many. There's as many as you think, large old farmhouses in Temple that would qualify for this. You know, every street in town might have one or two. And, you know, we're small. We're not like a real big town that might have hundreds of these. We're talking dozens, not hundreds. So it's, doesn't mean that these aren't all great valid points and concerns, for sure.
I think.
But the main reason why we are proposing this through, you know, all the work we did with which Carter was on, and the committees, and Russ, yeah, right. You get the input from the community, and part of the input from the community, I thought, was exactly this.
They support this.
That they supported.
This is one of the
Yeah.
more
Yeah,
higher rated things the community wanted.
yeah.
So it doesn't change visually the rural character of the town because it
Yeah.
still looks the same.
And I think we're kind of focusing on historical houses. My house was built in 85 and would fit this. You know, it's just.
It's not big old houses.
No,
only.
it's just a long house. It's
Yeah.
like 3 ranches plopped together, which would easily put partition walls in there. I could live in one, rent out another one, rent out another one, and then if I retire and move away, there's my income to live as a retired person. And it's not by any means historical. You know, it's,
Or downsize, even if you just wanted to downsize.
yeah.
Mhm.
Because I don't think we're talking about just, oh, you're doing this just to historical houses.
True.
You could have a big cape upstairs, downstairs. Maybe you could do something that, you know? But it could be
Yeah.
built in the 80s.
Yeah,
So today you could do that as a internal attached ADU
Yeah,
for one
for
unit.
one, yeah.
And this would allow you to do essentially
This-
two units, 2 new units in addition to the one that's.
Right,
already there.
because
Yeah.
the way it's set up, it's segmented into 3
Right.
parts anyways, it almost makes sense.
And it wouldn't have the restriction of sizes that the ADUs require.
Yeah, I was
Right.
just gonna say that, exactly.
Yeah, that's.
I'll just throw in there, I don't fit the multifamily piece of this, but in my case, I am an example of what's been reflected here. I have my family that wants to move here and it's difficult to afford. But I built a brand new house and it's not very big, as Ken can attest to. It's a timber frame house. But you know, my son wants to move and I have 60 acres, almost 60 acres. But I only have 66 for the frontage. So subdividing is a problem. And the ADU potentially is a problem because his house would have to be quite a bit bigger than mine. So it's not going to be, the ADU would have to flip the ADU, so to speak. And then it's cost prohibitive for me to build a huge house for his family. Because I would have to own that, right? You know, my problem's going to be with the subdividing piece, but finding a way to build a house that's bigger than mine on 60 acres for my son to stay in, you know, without being able to subdivide or get a variance to be able to subdivide with that frontage. Anyways. I'm just echoing the point that I am an example of someone that's family wants to move and be close by, and I want them to be close by to take care of me because I'm getting older and my wife. So, I'm taking care of my mother and I took care of my father. So, till he passed away. So, hoping that they'll reciprocate if I can get him in here.
Actually, in your case, it's a pre-existing lot of record, so you could go for a variance on the frontage and/or you could go for PRD, planned residential development. And make the frontage would be, basically make a road.
Which could be dirt. Doesn't have to be paved in a PRD. All right, well, are we good with the hearing portion of? Everybody good?
Oh, gosh. We have been advised by our town council to wait and see what happens at the state level on those. We do have them in town. We've been advised that technically they're not allowed, but we do have them in town. It's just you can't enforce for one and not for all. So we've more or less left them alone. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Description? Yeah. Selective enforcement, right, is not allowed.
Yeah. Okay, well, then, I'm gonna move that we, close the hearing portion of the meeting. All right, so, moving on, thanks everybody for coming. You can stay if you want, but the hearing is over for the, zoning questions.
So do you want to?
I don't want to do anything. I want to go home. It's 8:45. We really don't have time to jump into the land use, I don't think. The land use plan, we have to
I
kick the
haven't gotten
can.
any feedback from anybody. I don't know if anybody's read it.
Yeah, no, we're just doing some updates. It's housekeeping.
Master plan.
Yeah,
This
master plan stuff. Yeah. Yeah, Deb. No,
No,
no. So, well, tonight we were gonna have a work session and we were gonna work on the land use plan. I just know
and
that.
site plan review.
And I don't think, is it gonna be the end of the world if we kick the can till, well, it'll be next year now, wouldn't it
Yeah, well, this is the issue. So,
be? Yeah,
if we're going to have a second hearing on the zoning amendments, we would need to decide either tonight or at our first hearing in January. It'd have to be pretty quick turnaround to
Mhm.
post a second hearing.
mhm. So we have time to meet the first meeting in January and make the decision on the zoning amendments? Is that what you're saying? And still
We
have time
Yes, unless we're not making any substantive changes. Polling is different,
Mhm.
but if we're changing something existing, an existing language,
Yeah.
then we would have to have a second hearing. If
Yeah.
we're not changing anything other than removing, then we
Mhm.
do not have to have a second hearing.
So that would be January 7th. So you're saying we can meet on January 7th, make a decision, then still have time to post for a second
It
hearing
would have to be posted like, the next.
the next
but
day?
Well,
Yeah.
Thursday would be the newspaper,
Yeah.
so just a
Alright.
quick turnaround.
Well, I mean, do we think we need to have a second hearing?
I
so-
didn't hear any substantive changes. I heard a request to remove,
Mhm.
but I didn't hear any language changes unless others heard.
So one thing that's not clear to me is how many how many ballot questions does section 7 generate?
That's a good one,
Is
Murray.
it- I assume it's not a single one.
Section 7, that's the ZBA one, or do you mean,
A, B, and C.
So
or are you
mean
talking about the
number 4.
multifamily? Okay,
Yeah.
number 4.
so it's clear that Article 1 would, if we vote to push it forward, would be a ballot question.
Yes,
off-street parking would be a ballot question. It's not clear to me how we break up the next 3 pages.
So, to me, number 3 is and I can be overruled, but to me, number 3 is its own. That's the clarifying 1 attached and 1 detached are permitted.
Okay,
And-
so that's on what's on version 6 of your document. There,
So-
that's not numbered, so I'm just trying to,
Yeah,
I'm trying to get it right.
Right, so, okay. So
Yeah.
that would be number 3.
Okay, so section, it would be the 7.30.
Yeah, and I intentionally didn't number them because last year we ended up pulling one and there was some confusion
Yeah,
about.
yeah, that's okay. I
So I
just- Yeah.
was waiting to number them.
The
until-
multi-dwellings is 3.
Yep,
That includes 7.4.
I wouldn't include that. I would
Make that,
make
separate.
that part of the residential conversion one.
That makes sense to me. So if that became its own package,
Yes,
so it's either yes or no,
yeah,
and not yes in one and no on the other.
correct.
Yeah.
And then the attached ADU would be its own, and then the detached would be its own,
Okay. that
and then the
makes-
ZBA would be its own.
Right,
Yeah.
that makes sense.
So number 4 is,
Is the residential conversions.
yep, but
Okay.
it's,
Sorry.
but it's this 7.4,
Yep.
but
and
then it's
7C.
also
7C.
7C.
Includes
Correct.
7.
Are they one, did we answer the question? Is it one ballot?
I think that's that's what I think
Yeah,
would make sense.
I think it should be
Yeah,
one ballot.
it's all,
That should be one ballot.
no, really, you wouldn't want the rules to pass and not the.
Right,
thing.
right.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, I was a little confused on.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I put it in the section, the order of our zoning
Right.
ordinance.
Okay.
But
Well, I guess the question is now, if we don't want to have a second hearing, then that's okay, but if we don't have to vote tonight on all of this, we could wait till the 7th of January.
Right.
Knowing that we're not gonna have, we're most likely not gonna have a second hearing. But we're gonna wait till then to vote.
Does everybody need to digest it? Can we vote now?
I can pretty much vote now. I think I'm gonna vote yes on everything except for one of them.
I guess
So-
my only,
And I am sensitive to Carter's concerns about number 4. I'm leaning towards voting yes for that, but I can understand, for all the reasons we just discussed,
Yeah.
the investor type thing, but I just don't know how real that, I mean, not, that it's not real, but how big would, making it so that the owner must be a legal resident of the property
at the
helps,
time of the permit.
but like Carter said, who's enforcing that? So I see both sides. I'm really kind of on the
Just
fence.
That's
The
take a
towns that
review.
are around us, so do we want to be like towns around us? Is that, do we
Yeah.
want to have?
We have that requirement for attached and detached ADUs
Mm.
already. So it was about consistency is the language.
Yeah, I guess I don't feel strongly opposed to that as I do the permissive ordinance, obviously, and I've already voiced in previous meetings how I feel about that, but worst case scenario, we give it more time and more thought, just because it makes it to the ballot, and I hate saying this, because I haven't liked it when it's been done to me in the past, but we can still put it in the booth and let the people decide, and if they, they'll vote no for it.
Right.
And I don't like to say that very often, but I'm that torn on that one.
I guess how I feel about.
I'm not that torn on that one.
I had that same thought, but I guess I always will err on the side of giving people the right to vote.
Mhm.
But also, I think not presenting it after all the work that was done by the committee, throwing away all of the input that we got from people that took the time to go to the events and meet with people one-on-one. I think it would not be a good idea to ignore all of that input. So as far as having another hearing or not having another hearing, I guess I would just ask, like, do we feel like do we feel like there were people that maybe would want to come and say more who couldn't make it tonight because of the school meeting, you know, I would just like, I don't want people to think they can't comment if
Yeah,
they
we,
couldn't make it
we might
tonight.
get 10 new, fresh,
We might, or we might not. Who
but we
knows?
might not.
Yeah.
I feel like we get the same people, except maybe Jim would be here.
True,
But
yeah.
Jim sent us a very long letter and it
Yeah.
pretty clearly stated what he thinks, and he was there, well, we talked to him personally
Yeah.
last night, so.
Mhm.
Yeah, no, I wasn't actually even thinking when you were saying that about the permissive, I was thinking about number 4.
Yeah,
I think everything else, I don't really see any pushback. I don't sense it outside of this building.
right,
And I didn't sense it in here tonight either.
yeah,
Um,
right.
just the conversion. And
Is it worth discussing number 4 in person as a board at the next meeting to see if there's anything we should add or remove from the proposal that would make folks who are concerned about it feel less concerned about it? Is that worth the time next week at the next meeting?
I'm fine with that.
You could look into some, give you time to kind of look up some stuff or think
Yeah.
about it and.
Yeah.
Could we vote on the other stuff or just be done with it or we have to all right? I mean, so I'm just afraid that it's gonna be January.
Yeah, well-
And we're all gonna go, oh, but what if? then
And
all
it's
of a
the
sudden-
holidays in between
Mhm.
now and then. so-
Yeah, so we'd have to make a decision January 7th of accept or deny these going forward, or accept with changes, and if there were changes.
If
that
there's
were
changes, we
substantive-
can't make another. If we find at the next meeting, we want to make changes, we
Yeah.
don't have time to
Oh,
have
okay, I
another
thought you said we
hearing.
did. I thought
If
we
we're gonna make changes tonight would be the time to make
okay.
changes.
All right, I
Yeah.
missed that.
So that being said, then Carter, is there anything that we could put in the conversion language in the conversion proposal that would make it more palatable? In your opinion?
No, I'm not in favor of this. I mean, I think Christine, you've done a good job at adding detail to this to make it,
To protect.
to
us as
protect
much- yeah.
it, but I don't think it protects what I'm concerned about. But I'm not sure that we can write that into it because it's not. If this is voted through, then then what I'm concerned about will happen. So.
What about? It did seem like a lot of conversation focused around historical. What if is there something that we could add here that say like historical review or investigation?
I think that would come up during site plan review.
So that's part of that.
Yeah,
So that would be, I mean, I could see that, like the gentleman over there, it was the first house in Temple and.
Well, it was a Heald family that built 3 or 4 houses on the north end of town, and
Yeah.
a lot of them are buried in the cemetery right
It's
here.
pretty historic.
They're one of the founding families in the
Yeah.
town. So yeah, it is. It was a 1780-ish.
So inside
house that he
you
has,
could
yeah.
say, you know what, this is a historically significant house, maybe this is not the best place for that. Now, would that be,
Yeah, but what year do I mean, what do you say, like 18?
well, I don't know.
50?
I
know,
don't
that's-
think you can discriminate.
Can't.
Yeah, I like what you're saying, but I don't know how we do that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean, I would hate to, again, I would hate to see, I'm thinking more like my house, an 80s house.
yeah,
It's,
Yeah.
there's no historical value, there's no wonderful craftsmanship and hand on anything, it's.
Right,
some
and that's
jackass
a
put
totally
something
different,
there.
that is a totally different use case
Yeah.
than, and I agree with you, right? Like, that is not like, okay, whatever you want to create multi-units and that, it's not such a big deal. To me, the big deal is these old homesteads that exist in town that are worth preserving that.
Isn't there any kind of
No,
recognition of historical?
no, there, I mean.
To be on the historical register, you're gonna apply for all of this.
yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
It's too bad.
And our historic district is literally like 4 houses, so it's
Yeah,
not
it's straight, yeah, that's-
5, okay, yeah.
7, Murray's on the.
Oh, is
board.
Murray in
Yeah.
there? Okay.
Well,
Approximately, I forget exactly the count, but
It's a 1/4 mile radius, right?
Yeah.
You know, this fits the historical side of the house, when my son had a house in Hudson, it was a Sears house. You know, whatever those-
Oh, yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, ordered in the catalog, right?
We would never know it, but the health inspector pointed it out to us and showed us where they, you know, the beams in the basement and concrete on them, because that's what was used to, same thing was used for the form of the, you know, it was fascinating to learn and surprised. I'm fascinated by all.
Yeah.
Well, it's 5 minutes and 9.
So
So-
I apologize. I stepped out for a second. Was there a comment relative to the historic village district and this ordinance?
I was just saying there isn't protection for old homes because in like a historic district, because it's only right here in the center of town.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
and this would apply, the way it's written today, it would apply to the historic village district,
The,
right?
doesn't the historic village district oversee any development in the historic?
Only
We have a
ex-
historic
Yep, it's
district
only,
ordinance.
I believe, I'll ask our select board representative, I believe it's only advisory,
Mm.
voluntary.
I think you're right.
So there's two elements. There's the historic district zoning district,
Mhm.
which is everything within a 1/4 mile, and it's a little confusing because my driveway is within the 1/4 mile, but my house is maybe in it. But then there's the the historic district commission,
Mhm.
which is set up by lot numbers, not by radius. And it's voluntary acceptance into that program. And voluntary compliance, I think, with the desire for white paint.
I
I'm
see.
a little out of that.
I
because
thought
I'm
there
not-
was
My house is not
restrictions.
part of that.
I'm not either. That's right. I've
Yeah.
been asked to, but I'm not, right?
So I think it only affects, I think where they
No,
get
no,
involved is,
no.
hey, you want to change the color of your paint or the outside
I see.
facade.
Mm,
I think. But it really has no authority.
right.
What about if we
Yeah.
said a conversion, a lot that's been converted can't be subdivided further without a variance,
Without what?
a variance?
Yeah, so this is in regards to the conversion,
Yeah, so
Yeah.
like, so I mean, a small, like if it was on a 1/4 acre lot, it's big house, it doesn't really matter, but say like Carter's talking about, you got 100 acre lot with a big farmhouse in the middle. And you say, okay, we're gonna do that, but if you wanna come back and then subdivide it later, now you're gonna come to the ZBA.
Okay, so this happens a lot. I deal with a lot of builders to do this, so. The developer comes in, buys the 100 acres with the old farmhouse.
Yep,
They can subdivide that land, of course they can, it's America, right? But. They cannot convert. They can flip the house or. Sell it the way it is, if they want to subdivide, but they can't convert the house to multifamily. Can we
If
do,
they-
is that,
If they're trying to
can
subdivide.
we
at
do
the
that?
same
Can we
time.
legally do that? Is
I
that?
don't know, I'm just wondering, I'm trying to get around the idea that,
I think he was trying to do the flip of that, though, right? Basically say, okay, you can convert the house,
but you
but you
can't,
can't later subdivide it because it's
without like a variance or something.
without variance.
Cause that would, what Carter's saying is that that's what a developer's coming and just saying, no, I'm just buying the house and converting it, and all of a sudden they're subdividing everything.
Yeah, well, I mean, you can't, I don't think you can stop that from happening,
Yeah.
but you can stop the house from being a conversion. Possibly. Maybe, I don't know though. I mean, it's,
And that's what I feel like is already in place. If you want to convert your home, you go and you get a special exception to do that. You go to the ZBA and do that. Adding this just makes it easier for that to happen. Yeah, and you're not gonna stop that in every scenario. I guess my concern is once you create that multifamily in an old house, the value of it becomes different. You're not gonna go buy that and turn it back into a single family residence, right?
Right.
So that land is forever changed. And then the value of having farmland around that becomes worthless to that investor. So why wouldn't you sell that? Because selling it is going to generate money, or subdivide it and build houses on it. So I'm just saying you're changing the purpose of the home, which then results in down the road denser housing. Is that what we want? That's my concern, not that, and I feel for the families that you know, I understand that. And I think, I mean, I moved to Temple to be near family, right? I mean, I have family here, so I understand that. But I also think there's value in older homes that have property, right? And it's not, you know, like Russ, to your point, if they converted an 80s house, okay, yeah, like that, it's not like craftsmanship quality, the same kind of, you know, what they built in the 1700s, right? It's different.
Right.
And maybe that type of conversion makes more sense. I don't know. And also, how many people are asking to convert their houses? How many people went to the ZBA? I mean, to ask for a conversion, is this a regular occurrence that we need to add it to our zoning?
I don't think it's about that. I think it's about looking at the housing shortage and the pressures that it's putting on all of us, as evidenced by our tax bills, to add housing inventory. And this is a really small way to address that without having a big impact on the community. That's how I see it.
Never been, I'm just answering my own question in my head as I go through it. There's no zoning considerations for housing development area. How would you even?
There, you can build whatever you want, wherever you want.
I know right now, but I mean, as a way to answer that question though, is to provide an area that, okay, in this area.
There is a way you can do an overlay district.
Yeah, zones, but we
Mhm.
don't have that right now.
We don't have
But then you're gonna go through the process of anybody that lives in that area is gonna fight tooth and nail against that.
Right, because you're restricting their rights,
You know, then.
which we're doing anyway, you know.
It's really a tough situation, because I can definitely appreciate the need for housing. But on the other hand.
Well, and again, I guess I go back to, we got positive feedback on this particular proposal when we did the steering committee, and I think we need to let the voters decide.
Can we vote on this tonight on each one of these 7 amendments? And that doesn't mean that we can't change our mind at the next meeting, because we don't have to turn this in, you know, for the ballots until I think the end of January, correct?
Yeah, I have the dates. Just again, if we're gonna make any changes,
Yep.
we don't have any time to do that if we're gonna change any language.
Yeah, George says he thinks we should wait till the next meeting.
Okay.
I could go either way. Russ seems to think, Russ wants to vote tonight.
I wouldn't mind voting, just.
I mean, we could vote, if we vote tonight, and then we meet after the first of the year, and we can vote to reconsider 1 or 2 things that
Yes.
we could vote to reconsider, because nothing's etched in stone.
Right.
We're a board. We can bring things back to the table.
Sure. But on each one individually, correct?
Yeah, okay. So I guess we'll start with Carter, and we'll start with number 1.
What's the motion?
Okay, so the motion would be make a motion for all 7 of them?
Yes.
Okay. Motion to accept the proposal for Article 1 permissive ordinance. Carter, how do you vote?
No.
George? I vote no.
I'm so torn on this one. I'm gonna vote no, because I think the way it's written comes across threatening as opposed to. I think it could be worded differently with a little more information.
Yeah, I vote no.
I'd actually like to, I will vote tonight, but I would like to take some time to really interpret Mr. Kingston's email that I was able to get in print 15 minutes before the meeting, so I really haven't, we haven't really given him a voice and I kind of sense where he's going, but I do
Yeah.
want to spend more than a few minutes digesting his concerns and, having a conversation, follow-up conversation. I don't think that would change my thought here that we're hearing from the community that it's not the right time and place for this. And, potentially there's a better way to word it that is not, that also doesn't create the, the concern of offenses and really changing our zoning, the tone of our zoning, because that wasn't the intention when I was advocating for it earlier in the season. So, I will vote to not consider it at this time, but I would like to, talk to Jim and understand his concerns better and, potentially raise it at the next meeting.
Okay. Yeah, okay. All right, that's unanimous. On number 2, the amendment for off-street parking. Carter, how do you vote?
Yes.
George?
Yes.
I vote yes.
Yes,
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Number 3 is the amendment for to change the language on the multi dwellings to 1 attached and 1 detached ADU. Carter, how do you vote?
Sorry, clarification. Are
Yep.
we voting for just 7.3 or 7A and 7B?
Right now, it's
just 7.3.
just 7.3. Yeah, multi
Just that one
dwellings.
sentence. Well, there's,
Yeah,
I think the legal review added the word individuals after elderly. And they added to provide, so it's those 2 words added, and then this where it says proposed in bold.
Okay, yes.
George?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. And then here's the one we've been discussing the most, number 4, which is the residential conversion. And Carter, how do you vote?
No.
George? I vote yes, but my mind could be changed if we reconsider at a future meeting, possibly. I'm on the fence on it.
yeah,
No,
you
no,
should clarify.
no. George, we're on
The
Residential
multifamily.
conversion.
So
residential conversions.
I might make a suggestion. Before we take the vote, we might, because we just voted on Article 3 would be, or whatever the sequence would be. 1 attached, 1 detached ADU, the order
Yeah,
of
I agree.
the ballot might be, okay, then go to section 7A, then 7B.
Sure.
and,
Yeah.
That would make logical sense.
I agree with you.
On the ballot.
Yep.
Yep.
So we'll come back to that is my.
Okay,
is my-
so we are gonna vote on, so
So we're moving forward. We're gonna vote on the amendment for attached accessory dwelling units,
Section 7A.
7A. Carter, how do you vote?
Yes.
George, how do you vote?
Yes.
I vote yes.
yes,
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, and now the section for detached accessory dwelling units. Carter, how do you vote?
No.
George?
Yeah.
I vote yes.
yes,
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. And then then do we go
Then-
back
Yeah,
to
then do the total residential conversion,
residential conversion,
which is section 7.40 plus.
section 7C? Carter, how do you vote?
No.
George, how do you vote? Is this the one we're gonna try to abstain on? Is this what you were doing, George?
It's this one, right? As all in.
Yeah.
I'm voting yes, but like I said, we can talk about it more at the next meeting.
yes,
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, and then lastly would be the Board of Adjustment in regards to the appointments of alternates. Carter, how do you vote?
Yes.
George?
Yes.
Yes,
yes.
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 okay. Well, there you have it. Okay. It's 10 minutes past 9. Is there?
So
Obviously, we
just to
can't get,
clarify, so if I come up with a new version, I'm gonna reorder it. And I'm taking out the permissive one.
yeah.
Everything else is staying the way it is, other than the order will change.
Mhm.
Okay,
And then what, next meeting, because we don't have a unanimous on section 7B,
C.
7C.
Yeah, I'm just saying,
Discuss
I'm
more.
just saying it's on the table. We can bring it back up on the
Yeah,
table and, you know, when we, nothing's, we could revote, we can reconsider.
But I'd
Possibly.
say the other ones we don't have to think about. The 7.
Sounds like it was all unanimous, right?
Yeah.
And all the other ones, I
And
think.
Murray's gonna come back to us on the first one as well, but.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, well. I guess there's nothing else left really that we can't wait for the first of the year, is there, on our agenda?
The planning grant for SWRPC, did everybody get a copy of their contract?
I saw that, yeah.
Yep,
Were there any questions, concerns? You know, he's still planning to come to a future meeting, but.
Mm.
Nothing.
Yep.
Um,
So we'll continue with the work session for site plan review and master plan update on land use plan.
I'm sorry, I just on the HOP grant, there was
Oh.
one thing I was gonna suggest changing, which I don't remember, probably because it's too late. But I did talk to you about it. Do you remember?
I don't remember.
I think what it was is the way, it was the payment process.
Oh, yes. we did talk
Because,
about that.
I think in here, they talked about us paying when we receive the invoice, but that's not how it works with the HOP grant committee. They submit an invoice, I submit it to the HOP grant committee, and the HOP grant committee sends money to our treasurer, and the treasurer pays the invoice. And sometimes there's weeks in between. So I just want to make sure that's clear to SWRPC that they are not going to get paid right away. We don't get a check until they submit an invoice. So I think that's the only change that I thought needed to be made. And if everyone's okay with that,
Sure, they're used to that probably. Anyway.
I think so, yeah, but I just wanted to put that in the contract. And if everyone's okay with it, then, I guess, maybe by the next meeting, we can have a signed version.
That would be a good goal.
And then we can
Mhm.
start working on it.
Mhm.
And then I didn't get a copy of the year-end report you were gonna draft and send to me.
Right,
That's on there too. I'm trying to go quickly.
yep. Yeah. Yeah, that's January 17th is the deadline for that. There.
Yes. And I had a few things from the site plan review, which I can send you.
Yeah, and there's a couple of things I saw from the minutes that I didn't get. so.
Okay, perfect.
Do you know what this invoice is that I received? Is that even real? What is that?
Norton, yeah, I think that is not legit.
That's what I thought. I didn't reply. I just printed it out, but it looked like a
No,
scam to me.
Scam,
Yeah, that's what I thought.
don't pay it.
Yep.
Doesn't matter because you already opened it.
Yeah, I opened, yeah.
Yeah.
Great. All right, anything else? We're good?
Come on, George.
Make a motion.
Second,
Carter, how do you vote?
yes.
George?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
Meeting adjourned.
thank you.